hand on your heart, look up at the sky, smile, and say, hey, I'm alive. Thanks for being alive with me today.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the power of showing up. Holy smokes. That's so cool. I love it. Yeah. Just buzzing. That's so fun and good on you. Yeah. I mean, Jesse, I actually I showed up to that event for everyone around the event, not necessarily Jesse. Like I knew who Jesse was and everything, but like have a deep respect for, and just like that guy's like proven, he's absolutely proven. But yeah, like finding myself leaning more into his ecosystem and world because it's really inspiring. So that's cool that you've like, we all have our own story in terms of how we weave.
Yeah, well, and just on the topic of showing up, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to bring you on the show. I mean, I don't know. Do you identify as a type A or type B person primarily?
Oh, I'm type A to T.
Okay, yeah. So I'm type B, and I feel like a lot of my listeners are also type B. So, like, Brian, tell us your ways. But really, like, I'm just so impressed with what you've done. Just of course in your life and with self improvement daily tips. I mean, you have how many episodes now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but over 2,000.
That's insane. That's amazing. So, just how does showing up and sticking with something benefit you, or not even benefit you, but how does it enrich your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's you ask anyone in the personal development space, and they'll tell you that the only way to achieve success is through consistency. Like that is the greatest equalizer that no matter who you talk to, they're going to tell you. So it's true. You talk about the compound effect with Darren Hardy and how it's, the small, unsexy, mundane things done consistently over time create disproportionate results, right? It's the idea of compound interest in your life, right? You talk about like how you can actually acquire skills and build leverage because consistency helps you to accelerate your skill set development and your success, right? So it at the end of the day, like everyone knows that consistency works. It's just a matter of getting yourself to do it. And for me, I recognized very early on that consistency is more a matter of environment design than it is of willpower, right? Like you want to be more disciplined and being like, oh yeah, let me just tell myself I'm going to be consistent. This is my non-negotiable. This is my commitment. This is what I'm doing. It's like, yeah, that gets you a certain distance, but we know that willpower is a finite resource. On the days that we don't feel like it, our mind is going to start self-sabotaging, convincing us of a story that's not true to redirect our behavior into something that is more comfortable and not consistent. But when you have environmental design, that completely changes the calculus that your mind takes to figure out, am I going to take action on this? Am I going to be consistent or not? And for me, it was a forcing function of the way that I set up the podcast. So how do I get to 2,000 episodes? One freaking episode at a time, right? And that's because I was starting a podcast. I was actually kind of pivoting my career. And I was like, okay, cool. I want to learn audio. I want to kind of like build my personal brand. Perfect. Podcast. What do I want to talk about? Self-improvement. Okay, what should I call it? Self-improvement daily. That sounds like the right kind of thing that people would listen to. Oh, well, that means I need to create daily content. Done. Right? And it's the environment of that. It's the expectation and the pressure and all of that that then forces my behavior to be compliant with it. Right? So the fact that I'm at 2,000 episodes isn't because I have these great consistency habits, which I do, right? But that's not the reason. That's not the primary reason. The main reason is way at the beginning when I was investing in building the system and building the brand and everything. I set a specific expectation for myself, which is, oh, this is something you do daily. And if I don't, there are going to be people who are relying on me to say, hey, you didn't show up yesterday. Hey, what's going on? Hey, you're not as consistent as you say you are. And now there's this conflict in character. And all of that pressure, that affects the formula and calculus of your mind to say, oh, I'm not going to compromise my commitment to being consistent because look at all of these things that are pointing me in the direction to be consistent versus the things that are pulling me away from it. So that's where consistency really is a matter of environmental design more than is willpower. And I mean, that is a huge concept and like what actually entails environmental design. Here, I'll give you another example because this is something that kind of like comes into the book that I'm writing right now. I'm super excited to get it done. I don't know what your book writing process is like, Kate, but for me, since I'm the type A, my book writing process is 11 to 12 every single day. I write for an hour because that's what fits into my belief system, my workflow, my way of doing things. But there are times when I have things on the calendar that I choose not to do. You have on the calendar, you choose not to do. something becomes a priority, something comes up, it changes. So how can I be consistent in writing for an hour from 11 to 12 every single day? It's because of environmental design. I have a coaching community. In my coaching community, I have hour-long deep work sessions, which is basically you show up on a Zoom call and you tell people at the beginning of the call, this is what I'm going to work on. And at the end of the hour, with no conversation, only looking each other blankly in a Zoom screen and doing your work, you then report back on how you did. So cool. I have this blocked out section, which is protected deep work. But there are things that I might consider doing that are important, that are urgent, that are coming up to invest that time in doing. But I made an additional investment in my environment, which is I told my coaching community, if you see me on a deep work session, I will be working on my book.
Mm.
So now I show up at 11 and I have this blocked off call that I'm required to show up to because I'm leading it. And I told people with the pre-commitment that I'm going to be working on my book. I haven't considered working on anything else from 11 to 12 for the last 3 months because of the environment around the behavior. And that's how you get consistent, right? It's the environment design. It's all the things that push you in the right direction instead of you convincing yourself and willing yourself to do it. So that's how you get to 2,000 episodes. That's how I write a book, right? It's consistency is key. And consistency comes from the things around you versus entirely the things inside you.
Wow. That's incredible. So when you came up with the idea for the deep work group community, was that a function of like I want to write my book, how can I keep myself accountable? Was it like that? What was the genesis?
Yeah, so it was born. So it's not necessarily just a deep work community. It's a best life community. So it's a personal development group coaching community. And that's one of the live events that we have. And the reason that got on the calendar in the first place was because a lot of people said, hey, you know what? I'm having a tough time doing the things that are on my schedule. Those, we call them eat the frogs, right? Those things that you don't want to do, you know, you got to do, and you feel really good when you do them. So we created this environment, which is, hey, cool, let's all show up at the same time and do them together. It makes it a little more fun, a little less stressful, and we know we're going to get it done, right? So that was the genesis of the idea of these hour-long deep work sessions. But then, you know, this is getting into other theories and philosophies for me, but when you want to change your life, it's about building systems, right? Systems are part of your environment, in my opinion, right? So you structure environment. One of the ways you structure environments through systems. So for me, I created this system which is, all right, cool. Now, because I was doing the deep work sessions long before I started writing the book, I then transitioned my deep work sessions to say, okay, cool. I made this commitment to write a book. And another thing I did, right? I told my foremost mentor, a person that I do not want to let down, that I want to impress, that it really matters what they think of me. I told them, I said, hey, I'm going to have the first draft of my book done by my birthday, which is middle of November. So now, once I made that commitment, I was like, shit, I need to do this. So what can I do to prepare myself to actually get it done? And I was like, cool, let me build a new system. And that system was, let me do it during the hour-long deep work sessions, which are already a staple in my day. Let me tell the people in the community that I'm going to be working on it. And that's how progressively I've been able to get it done, right? So the deep work genesis just came from a matter of people needing this, me benefiting from it, us kind of collaborating to figure out what the right fit of it is, and then me taking it upon myself to say, how can I maximize the usage of this to achieve one of my goals? And that's what it's become over the last few months.
Wow. Well, I mean, thank you for being a leader in that because I think people don't realize that our good they think that we have to have a certain degree or a certain certification or a certain whatever. They think in order to share our gifts and to teach people things. Whereas obviously you're very good at what you do. You seem like you have natural born leader qualities. And you've taken it upon yourself to take the good that you're doing and share it with other people, and in that then it becomes this mutually beneficial in many ways just effort to shine and reflect yours and other people's light.
Yeah. I mean, that's anything. And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's something that I've admired about you from the very beginning is your lifestyle in your agency that you have. You're like, I want this, I'll go get it. I think this is interesting, let me go try it, right? And it's like, and there's so many people that get in the way of just allowing themselves to step into that next level, to experience the next tier, to be that person that in their mind they want to be, but then fear, doubt, uncertainty, judgment, whatever it is gets in the way of you actually doing it, you know? So that's something I see in you. And thank you for seeing that in me in ways. There are ways I'm really strong in it. There are ways that I'm weaker in it, right? And it's the awareness of where I'm set up for success and where I'm not to be able to move forward with it. But that's something. And actually, this comes back to when we last saw each other at Running Man. Something that I've been really thinking about is this like almost as like catchy loop of a thought, which is when's the next time I'm going to be this close to blank, right? And for Running Man, my thing is when's the next time I'm going to be this close to running 50K, right? Because I signed up to run a half marathon. Everyone goes further than they expect to. So then I ended up going the marathon. And then as I was like done with my marathon, that thought kept in my mind. It's like, when's the next time I'm going to be this close to running 50K? It's like, well, I've got to run a marathon again to get this close to 50K. It's like, well, when's the next time I'm going to run a marathon? Oh, I don't freaking know. Cool. Then I guess I'll do it now because when's the next time I'm going to be this close to doing it? Right. And it's like, it's this fun little energy of I'm already there, might as well. And even this happened this weekend too. I make this, my family's in Northern California. I live in San Diego in Southern California. And I make the drive up and back a ton just to be able to see my family and be involved in their lives, especially before I have my own family and stuff like that. And on the drive down the 5, I don't know if people have done the 5, but there is nothing for probably 300 miles between Stockton and like North LA, essentially. It's nothing. It's the grapevine, like it's kind of ugly. But for whatever reason, as you're getting like kind of over the grapevine and down south toward LA, there's this beautiful lake that's called Pyramid Lake that's on the like western side of the 5 freeway. And for years, I've told myself, one of these days I'm going to check it out. But we know that life gets in the way, right? It's like, oh, well, no, I need to get home to do this thing. Or, oh, no, it's really important that I get my rest this time. Or, oh, I don't know, it's kind of out of the way. Maybe it's not that cool. And I've driven past it dozens of times, literally dozens of times, looking at it being like, one day I'm going to do that thing. And then I was driving past this weekend. I was like, when's the next time I'm going to be this close? I don't know when I'm driving. I've always wanted to do this. It's 95 degrees outside. Let me go to the lake. Let me check it out. And I put aside all of the concerns and the things that would tell me not to. And I went down, no idea if I took the right exit, go to the state trooper who's like, hey, like, what are you doing here? I'm like, I would like to go to the lake. And he's like, cool. I was like, do I have to pay? He said, yes. I was like, what do I really? He's like, yes. I'm like, okay. And then I pay and I go to the lake. And then again, I was like, and I was checking it out and I was wearing travel clothes and everything was dirty because I had been traveling, right? But then I asked myself again, when's the next time I'm going to be this close to swimming in the lake? And it's like, well, you got to go to the lake to be this close to swim in the lake. So I was like, cool, let me go swimming in the lake. Why not? So I went in my shorts and I took off my shirt and I like took my backpack and I just went in the water. And it's like, same thing. Oh, well, what if my clothes don't dry in time? Or, oh, like now you're going to be uncomfortable. Maybe you get rashes on the drive home. Or, oh, like you're going to get your car seat wet, whatever. It's like all those stupid excuses that keep you from doing things. And it's like, and that's what I'm leaning into, that energy of when's the next time I'm going to be this close to? And it's continuing to escalate the story. And I'm having so much fun with it because you get to that next level of things that you normally wouldn't do, but you're inspired to do because you've always had that, like, it's living. That at the edge of that is living, and yeah, so those are 2 examples in the last couple of weeks where I've been leaning into that. And I know that you certainly relate with that because that's so much part of the way that you choose to live life. And I really admire that about you.
You just gave me the chills when you said that, like, that is living. When we get past those excuses, like, I do it, right? Like, you do it, we all have these excuses, but when we can get past that and just do the thing, right? Like, of course, we wanna have calculated risk and determine whether or not this is dangerous and then whether we wanna do it. But beyond calculated risk, a lot of it is just noise. It's just, sort of irrational or unbased fear. And that question, when is the next time I'm going to be this close to doing X? And it also seems like it's rooted in this idea of immediacy. And I think these ideas are very related, where it's like, getting past the doubt and then immediacy. Because a lot of us are like, oh, I'm going to do that one day, or oh, I'm going to, I can't wait till this time when I do it, or oh, I'll do it next time I come. But this idea of incorporating immediacy has been very instrumental in my life. And I feel like this just profound question and the story that you just told was just absolutely like mic drop beautiful, of when am I ever going to be this close again? And then that's just pushing us to take that next step out of our comfort zone. And it's almost like rooted in laziness in a way, right? It's like, well, I don't want to have to do a marathon again, and I might as well do the 50K. But I one of my most favorite things is like capitalizing on our like perceived weaknesses, just like you said about how you build these sort of external like guardrails in, like you tell people that you told your mentor that you're going to have the book by this date, and then if we don't do that, then we suffer pride. That was how I wrote my book as well. Or that was how when I said I was going to quit my job and travel around the world, I told a lot of people, and then the moment came that I got really scared and I was like, this is insane. Quit a job at Google to go travel around the world, like, that's gonna be so ex and I was like, I didn't wanna do it anymore, but I had told so many people that my pride saved me because I was like, "Well, I can't not do it now." And so I'm all about capitalizing on our inherent selfishness and our inherent pride because we're human and we have our inherent laziness when like I don't want to have to run another marathon in order to get to this 50K. And that's cool coming from you. Like I'm a type B person. I'm like messy and all over the place and I managed to get a lot done miraculously, but from a type A person like you, hearing that like you do feel a sense of like not only drive but also pride, that you do feel a sense of like I don't want to have to run another marathon. Like I don't want to call it laziness, but I can't think of another word right now. It's really inspiring coming from you because I don't know about anyone who's listening, but I perceive people a type A people to be very on at all times. So I hope that doesn't
Mm.
offend you. But I view it as just like this really beautiful like humanization of type A people and how you take the inherent weaknesses that we all have as humans and translate them into high achievement.
Yeah, no, I think if we're relating, if we're kind of like getting in the shoes of a type A person, the type A person really enjoys structure, right? Like that's kind of that's the zone of genius. That's the preferred workflow. Like all of its preferences, and it is our comfort zone. That's what type A versus type B is. It's like what's most familiar to us and what's most comfortable to us. But what's interesting with structure is I've found that structure gives you more ability to be spontaneous because instead of worrying about, well, when am I going to get these things done? Or if I'm going to get these things done, you have a clear plan to say, this is what I've committed to. This is what my day looks like. This is how it's all going to work. And that example was perfect, right? So the reason here, let's diagnose what happened as a type A with this weekend experience of going to the lake, right? Like the Pyramid Lake. So basically, I was visiting my family. I was at my nephew's baseball game. I had allocated on my schedule, which I have in 30 by 30-minute increments, right? Type A, 30 by 30-minute increment schedule. I had allocated that I was going to be at that game and with my family until noon. What happened though was the game was cut short because it was hot and they decided to play 2 innings instead of three, and which means that we were done before. And I told my brother, I was like, hey, I'm going to get on the road after the baseball game. So baseball game was done an hour early and I'm on the road an hour earlier than I expected to. And I put a little extra buffer time in for traffic that I was going to miss now because I was a little earlier, which means I found this extra hour and a half that was like not accounted for on my schedule. I was running an hour and a half early. So what can I do with that? Because I know, okay, cool. I've got my work requirements here. I've got my meals here. Like all of those things are planned to happen at this time. So it's like, oh, that means I do have this time to do something fun and spontaneous, right? So it's that interesting marriage of the structure gave me the awareness to know that I was able to be spontaneous. And then I was able to rub my hands and be like, oh, well, what do I get to do then? Like, what can I do? And of course, I could have just gotten home earlier and been on my phone and scrolled and wasted the time, right? Like many people do, but I was in like an environment in an energetic state where I wanted to kind of experience things. I actually made 2 stops. I made one stop at a reservoir and then one stop at the lake because those were the 2 spots I always wanted to hit on this drive home. And as I got in the car, I was like, cool, I've got this extra hour and a half. So that's what I'm going to do to fill the time, right? Because that's the structured element of it. Instead of just going into the situation being like, well, let's see what unfolds. I was like, I was in my mind, I was intentional about, oh, I've got this extra hour and a half. Cool. So what can I do? Like, what does this mean for my schedule? How am I going to make my adjustments right now so I can adjust and update my expectation? So I was like, cool. I'm going to go to San Luis Reservoir. I'm going to go to Pyramid Lake. I'm going to check it out. Didn't expect to swim in it, right? But that was part of, oh, I got more time and oh, I already got lunch and like, oh, I'm good to go, right? So anyway, it's like, it's interesting how the structure gave me the space to be spontaneous because it was all calculated and it fit into my comfort zone of, well, this is kind of the ecosystem, the environment that I was entering.
Yeah, what is the quote? "With great discipline comes great freedom." And that's something that I
Yeah,
wasn't really
structure
born
creates
with.
freedom. That's Jocko Willink.
Oh, okay, cool, yeah, and I wasn't really born with that, but or nor was I raised with a lot of structure. I was raised with a lot of discipline, but not a lot of structure, but as I get older and I develop more discipline, I do experience more freedom and more peace in a lot of ways. So take us inside that 50K and take us inside your head and how you got through it. And what, what was a high moment, what was a low moment, and then what was the inside Brian voice while you're running 50 kilometers?
Yeah, well, I mean, that starts in the first mile. So of course, the last 5 of the 50K, the fast 5 miles of the 31 essentially are the most challenging, but it starts with the first mile. It even starts before that, right? So I'm type A. This is a theme. I prepared for it. There were people that I was even traveling with that didn't train for the event. Just unfathomable to me. But it's like, really, you're going to sign up for this thing, and you're going to. But again, that's my comfort zone. Is like I want to be prepared for the things that I do. That's how I work. So then I like built a training plan. I worked up to it, right? So, I ran the first half marathon, and I just, basically ran it with one guy who was running at about the same speed as me. And that was my goal, was to run the whole, I'd never done a half marathon before. So it was to run the whole half marathon. But I also knew that there was going to be a lot of challenge to come later. So I was actually preparing myself. You'll remember the track, right? So it's this basically mile long loop around the campsite, and there's all these vendors and stuff, and everything's happening on the side. But you run this mile long loop around. You do it as many times as you can, or as many times as you want to, right? And on the far side, on the opposite side of the starting line, is the hill, right? So it's kind of like there's this, I don't know, call it like a half-mile hill that isn't too steep, but it gets you. And it's like, it is long and you're looking up at it. And I trained myself from the very beginning. The first lap, like even the first lap through like the 10th lap, every time I hit the bottom of the hill, the guy that I was running with, I told him, hey, this is our favorite part. This is the best part, the hill. We love the hill. Like training myself to associate with it that way, right? So that when it came time for me to do my 31st lap, I'm hitting the hill and I'm like, cool, I love the hill, right? I've done it this many times. And yeah, so that's one of the ways I was able to kind of get through the process. Yeah, I hit the half marathon, and I knew that I was going to keep going. I didn't know I was going to push to the full marathon. I wanted to push to the full marathon. Certainly didn't know I was going to push to the 50K. I've got this thing inside me, which is, and maybe there's a version of it being self-discipline, or you called it kind of pride, right? Maybe it's that. But basically, when I have the idea of pushing myself in a workout, I have to do it. Like it's just it's almost this inner battle where I fail if I don't respond to the idea of me being able to push myself, which makes me really careful about what I commit to, because that is beyond my capacity, and that is outside my comfort zone to do those things. So I would like to get better at pushing myself more and making bigger commitments more often, because I know that gets me outside of the normal rhythms and patterns that I'm in. But anyway, so I already knew when I was doing the half marathon, I was going to try and push to the full marathon, just because I had that idea. It's like, well, now I have to do it. So I was going to try to. And it was like lap 14. So it was like literally the lap right after the half marathon. I finished my running. Then I started like alternating walk and run a mile essentially. And so maybe it's a little after that. So I walked the next mile. Then I was like, oh, I'm feeling good. So let me run before I finish that mile. And I got to the very top of that hill. And I just got this huge cramp in, like, it's my left soleus, right? So kind of like my left shin, basically. And I was like hobbling, I was trying to straighten it out and stand, and people were running past me being like, you all right? Like, you good? And like, yeah, just cramp, whatever. And in that moment, I had this realization of like, oh shit, this is hard. Like, I'm not just going to be able to do this easy. Like, this is going to be really challenging. My body's not prepared for this. And I was entering that zone of something I hadn't trained for, which is like, okay, perfect. This is what I need more of. And like, here I am in this environment that's helping me to do it. Right. And the experience was basically every 2 or 3 miles, it was another one of those things that came up, which was like, oh, this might stop you. So first was the soleus, then it was my right quad, then I started getting a blister on my pinky toe, then I started chafing, right? So it's like all of these start to come up, and it's like for 2 or 3 laps, it's the only thing you can think about, being like, this hurts, this sucks, I don't like this. but it's like, just keep going. And then eventually that one goes away. And then the next one pops up. And then that one goes away. And the next one pops up. And that one goes away. And the next one pops up. Right. And it was just a matter of being committed to let me go as far as I can and let me test the edge of what I can handle and what I'm capable of. And, and there's so much fulfillment in that, so that's that. Then I get to the full marathon, and this is how it gets to 50K, right? Because
So
I
the full
heard as I
marathon,
was
just
doing the
pause.
marathon.
The
Oh
full
yeah.
marathon is so the half marathon is how many laps? The full marathon is how many laps?
Yeah, half marathon's 13 miles, so 13 laps. Then full marathon's 26 miles, 26
Oh,
laps.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then I heard that and I heard from a birdie that was at the event that's like, oh well, 50K is only 31 miles. That's only 5 more laps, right? And I had that idea in my mind, right? That whole thing of like, you've got to do what you like have that idea of. And I'm like, shit, am I gonna go 50K? Can I really? It's like, I don't know if my body can handle it, right? So I hit that moment of like meeting up with my pride and my character, be like, am I gonna say no to this one? Right? Like I was considering it and I was like, I finished my marathon. I'm celebrating. I'd never gone a half marathon before. A marathon's a huge win, like unbelievable, right? So I'm good there. Then I'm like, you know what? Let me do like a cool down lap. I'm not going to push it. I hadn't made a decision about how I was going to continue. I was like, let me just kind of like walk this off. And, that's the right thing to do after a long race is kind of cool down. So I start walking. Oh, there's a whole other story I can tell you about this. But basically, there's one guy at the event named Jeff Brown. He's becoming a good friend of mine. Such a good story about how I met him. But so he just trained to run. Actually, he completed it yesterday or Sunday. But he just completed walking 3 trail marathons in a row in Tahoe, and he's part of Jesse Itzler's crew and everything they got going on with endurance sports and everything. So this Running Man was kind of like one of his ways of training a marathon walking just as like a tune-up. So that was his commitment. He and his son were walking there, and I was running around him. So anytime I saw him, I was like, "What's up, Browns?" And I'd kind of like give him a peace sign and keep going. I'd walk with them occasionally. I finished my marathon, and I'm walking slow, right? Like this is more than I'd ever gone in my life, so I'm walking slow, and I basically like feel this presence behind me, and then I hear a voice, and it's Jeff, and Jeff goes, "Hey, you finish it? Like you done?" I was like, "Yeah, I just finished the marathon." It's like, "Awesome, congratulations, that's huge. And you plan to go half marathon? That's great." "Yeah, it is great." And I'm like, "How much more do you have?" He's like, "We got 6 miles." And that's when the moment in my mind hit me where I'm like, these guys are going 6 more miles. I've got to go 5 more miles. If I
Wow.
hang with them for the next 5 miles, then I get to my 50K. And see, that's the system. So again, like my mind works that way. The type A was like, oh, well, what's my pathway to achieving this? It's like, cool. Now I have my game plan. I can execute the plan. Whereas in a tired state, it's hard for me to come up with the plan. Like, oh, well, am I going to walk the rest of this? I'm going to do it by myself. Am I going to run part of it? What am I going to do? And then this was the plan. It's like, okay, I can tag along with them. I can be their shadow. They walk 3/4 of it. They run the last quarter of it. I do that 5 times with them, with their company. It'll make it easier. That's my way to get to 50K. And I had that moment. And I was talking to Jeff's son about this, Brock. I was like, when's the next time I'm going to be this close to doing 50K? He's like, well, if you put it that way, I'm like, yeah. So that's what helped me. So that was the environment and the system that helped me to complete the remaining 5 miles, even though I didn't need to, but a part of me told me I really wanted to. So yeah, I'm super, super proud of how I responded to it the whole time. But that's how the 50K happened.
Wow.
And yeah, I feel good about it.
I'm so proud of you. You had never done a half marathon. You showed up to do a half marathon, finished that, did the marathon, and then you just took us through how you mentally got to 50K, right? Like that's absolutely insane. And there's really two things that stick out to me. I mean, other than again, I'm just not only proud of you, but just in awe. I just think that's so cool. And thank you for taking us into your mindset. But you talked about this what I noticed in that last part that you shared about, you had hit the marathon and you're like walking it out, like in your mind, you're finished. And this idea of 50K sounds big. It's like, oh my gosh, 50K. It seems like this huge thing. It's insane. It was not in my plan. But then as that guy came, what was his name?
Jeff.
Jeff came up behind you. It's like at that moment you took a big scary idea and a big scary feeling, which is this idea of doing a 50K when you weren't even planning to, and you applied logic to it. And this has helped me so many times in my life too, because my mind is a terrifying place. Like, I will make big deals out of everything. Every third day, I'm dying of some obscure cancer, or I have a brain eating amoeba, or this idea that I came up with that I'm going to, like, you know, do a speech at Oxford when I've never spoken to an academic audience is like insane. But when we apply logic to that, because our minds are wild places, especially when we let our overthinking start to go. But when we can apply logic to that, that's where I've found that it does push us over. And a lot of times, like, I had a therapist for like a year or two when I was really in a not a good place mentally. I was in a lot of negative thinking. And she would just hit me with logic. I thought I was like about to be homeless. And she's like, Kate, you told me that you have this amount of money in stock. Like, you're not, you could sell it. Like, you're not about to be homeless. And I'm like, oh, but really in my mind, I was literally about to be on the streets, you know? And so that element of applying logic to the wild west of our minds and taking a big crazy idea and just saying like, okay, let me put my emotions aside for a second and just try this idea on like a shirt. Let me just try it on and see like what would it take to get there? Oh, it's only 5 more laps and I got these people next to me that can like take me through it. Like, I think I can do it. And then you just take that next step and you try. So I really admire your ability to take one step away from fear and look at something from logic with a burst of drive and motivation and to get yourself over the line.
Yeah, I mean, that's what consciousness does, you know? Like, we have that unconscious bias, which is what you're talking about. Oh, it's what's the easier thing to do? What's the lazy thing to do? What's the thing that's going to keep me safe? What's this or that? But then when you can activate the conscious side of your mind and be intentional about, well, what do I want? Then you get to make a choice with that energy and then take the actions that correspond with it. And if I'm reflecting back on what my original intention was for Running Man, it was to push myself hard and to be proud of the way that I respond to it. So I could have achieved that, and I did achieve that at the half marathon. I could have achieved it and did achieve it at the full marathon. But getting to 50K, like, and doing something beyond what I even knew was a possibility. Like, I thought maybe I'd get to a marathon. I assumed a 50K was twice a marathon. I didn't know, right? Like, I just didn't know because it wasn't in my vocabulary. But then I find out, oh, it's only 5 more miles, and, oh, well, I'm pretty destroyed, but what's 5 more miles gonna do, right? Like, perfect, I'll do it. And so that was it was that intention, it was the conscious intention that I'd set prior and primed myself to be like, "I'm going to push myself, and I'm going to take pride in how I respond positively to the adversity I experience. That is how I'm measuring my performance." So that was another moment for me to look at that intention to say, and what do I choose?
Mhm.
And I chose to push myself and to respond to adversity with, in a way that I'm proud of. So
Yeah.
if anything, that was the reason. That decision to go from a marathon to 50K was the reason I showed up. And if I would have said no to it, we'd be having a different conversation. It's not like it would have been a disappointment, but now I see what's possible because I have more trust in myself when I meet those moments that I will respond positively to them. And that is mission accomplished.
Oh, you can't there's no price on that. There's no price on that self pride, of knowing that you accomplished something, but also the the experience that you get pushing yourself beyond what you even thought was possible. Like you said, you didn't even know what a 50 how many miles a 50K was. Like, that is so cool and bananas. And now you get to now have that in your life experience. Like, having the 50K is cool, but what you're saying is the feeling that's associated with that, not only having accomplished it, but that lived experience of pushing beyond boundaries, pain, fear, overthinking. I mean, that's the real win, because that's just like a feeling that you can now know what it's like to experience that and apply that to so many other areas of your life. And then also inspire people like me and everyone who's listening today.
I'm so glad you said that because that's exactly what this means. What you just shared is exactly what this is all about, which is Yeah, so I can go 50K. Do I need to do it again? I mean, someday I'll prove it. If I go back to Running Man, I'm gonna have to, just because I know that's how I work, right? Which I'll worry about next year. But you're right. It was me finishing and saying, wow, I didn't know that I was capable of this. What else am I telling myself I can't do that I actually can do? Right? And it's the fear that gets in the way of being bolder and getting yourself on bigger stages or to create bigger partnerships. It is the experiences of, oh, well, what if I stop my long drive and it's actually an unsafe area and I'm like threatening myself by getting off at this lake and it's really sketchy or something like that. It's those manufactured things that are part of what's kept us where we're at. And this experience showed me I can get beyond that. And those reasons, those excuses, those exceptions, those voices, that sabotage doesn't control me. And that I can overcome the sabotage, I can overcome the voice to then live to the extent that I'm telling myself I want to. Because consciously, I want to do 50K. I want to stop at the lake. I want to live the biggest, baddest, most impactful life I possibly can. Hell yeah. Like that's what I want to do. That's what I've told myself I want to do. And that's what I tell others I want to do. But then when it comes to doing it, sometimes it's different because of the fear and the judgment that all of those things come up. But the experience of completing the 50K and doing something that was beyond what I thought was possible for myself then sheds light on all of those things that I really want, that I'm telling myself I want in my life. And it says, you know what? Maybe you can too. And that fires me up because that's living, right? That's living. And that's what I desire more of in my life. And it's opened up a whole new frontier of what I want to go chase after. And I'm super inspired by it because I'm more hopeful that I can.
Oh, I believe you can. I 1000% believe that you can, and you in sharing your story today, you've helped all of us as well. And another thing I want to highlight from what you shared is it's so funny when you were talking about the different things that cropped up that were obstacles that started, your shins started hurting and then you started chafing and then started getting a blister on your toe, which is like that's really painful. It's not just like a blister. It's like running with a blister or walking with especially my heels girlies know like it's really painful. But that they cropped up and then dissolved away. And when you were talking, I was
Mm,
thinking back to when I did a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which is a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And that is one of the lessons from Vipassana. And that's what you do actually. So you're meditating for literally like I meditated for 10 hours a day for like 10 days. And one of the aspects of meditation that they do is they have you, once you get a little bit more advanced, they have you focus on you just like scan your body and you focus on any areas of pain or any areas of discomfort. And let's say you get to like my knee hurts because I've been sitting cross-legged in the in meditation for already 7 hours today. So it's like, oh, my knee hurts. And what you do is you just watch it from a non-attached standpoint, and then you just watch, and it's wild. My knee will be throbbing 9 times out of 10. Like, sometimes the pain does persist, but 9 times out of 10, my knee will be throbbing. But if I can just detach myself and be like, "Oh, that knee seems to be radiating some type of pulsing energy," it will just go away. It's absolutely bananas. And I think that what you described in that communicates very beautifully to what you talk about removing these mind blocks, these perceived limitations, which is that these pains, these obstacles, these thought blocks that we have, they're intangible. They are a lot of times constructs. And the more that we latch onto them and look at them as a concrete wall instead of like a fence made of like very light bamboo, then we create them and they become stronger and stronger. Whereas if we can just sort of be detached and say, "Oh, my knee hurts," like what's that trying to tell me? Or I wonder if this will go away after my seventh lap or whatever. Or oh, this idea that I could never run a 50K, let's apply logic. What is that based on? And does that limitation begin to dissolve when I detach myself from it? And there aren't that many reasons why I couldn't, and I might as well freaking try. So I just, yeah, you, for being, such a, as we've talked about in this episode, a person who really thrives on structure, you are very open minded, right? Like you are very open minded to consider these ideas from alternate standpoints that have radically changed your life.
Of course, you have to be. Yeah, you have to be. But when you're talking about attachment, it reminds me of something that I'm elaborating on in the book right now, which is exciting because I have finished my first draft, but I'm doing my first review so that there's a quality first draft for my mentor ready to go. But it's actually comes from Jack Canfield. He's got In the Success Principles is one of his most iconic books. He's got this formula, which is E plus R equals O. Event plus response equals outcome. And that's what detachment essentially starts that equation, which is an event happened and there is no charge to it. There is no emotion, there's no meaning, there's nothing. It is what it is. It exists, right? That is all that you can apply to it. In the book, what I'm elaborating on is I call the event kind of like the situation, right? There's the situational factors of, yeah, this is what happened. This is kind of what's going on around it. It's the context, right? Is what I'm kind of like elaborating event to mean more of situation because there's other things that need to be considered. But then you get into response, and the response has these two different sides to it. And the response purpose is to work with the event to figure out the outcome. The metaphor that I use in the book is a calculator, right? And essentially, when you use a calculator, you have certain numbers, you press buttons, minus, plus, divided by, square root, equals, boom, output, right? Event are all of the numbers, response are all the little processes that you click on to manipulate the numbers, and then outcome is your answer, right?
Hmm.
So I use that, I basically use that metaphor. And so the response has, or in the way that our mind works as it relates to assigning meaning to events and like creating attachment from what is inherently detached, which is an event, is two-sided. So there's your unconscious influence of your response, and there's your conscious influence of your response. And that's exactly what we were talking about before, which is the unconscious influence has the evolutionary predispositions to say, oh, well, I'm going to be lazy, or oh, this might threaten my safety, or oh, I like this positions me differently in the social hierarchy, or whatever it is, like all of these different things, or belief systems that we have. Oh, well, I haven't been good enough in the past, or oh, well, that would offend someone if I did it like that, or whatever, right? These unconscious influence feed into what the response is that then produces the meaning, the outcome, right? But with conscious influence, you can choose what buttons you press in the calculation. The unconscious influence is basically you put a number in and then all of a sudden, boom, answer pops up. You're like, wow, it's pre-programmed. I didn't do anything and it changed the numbers. What was that? Let me figure out what might have manipulated the numbers. That is the unconscious influence. The conscious influence is you pressing the buttons yourself to say, oh, I'm going to do that, to that, to that, to that, to that, to that, to produce this meaning. I can choose this is the meaning that I want through conscious influence. And at any given moment, conscious influence can override our unconscious influence. Like we can, like perfect example, E plus R equals O, right? So event, response, outcome. I'm driving down the 5, Pyramid Lake, right? A part of me was like, the unconscious response. Oh, event, here's the exit. Response, unconscious, be like, oh, well, I don't know if that's the right place. And I'm not really, all these things, it's unsafe, whatever. That's the unconscious response. But conscious influence that overrides it was, oh, well, I set the intention that I wanted to explore today. So now I'm telling myself, no brain, this is the event, boop, 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 boop. This is the outcome. This is an opportunity. This is what we're doing, right? So when you think of detachment, the detachment happens with the event itself. The event happens because then you can assign a specific event to create an outcome. Or if you want to be completely detached just to observe, then you choose for the response to be nothing, right? And then your conscious influences say, let me step back and not assign any meaning to this. It's basically like turning off the calculator, essentially, where it's like, okay, that's the event and that's it, right? The outcome is the event. So you can basically take that whole part of the formula to zero if you're trying to truly detach. But anyway, yeah, detachment it's a huge tool for us. But it's considered in a larger framework that is just the mind's workings to be able to create meaning. That's all the mind does, is create meaning from everything we experience. And the event is neutral. The outcome is not. Something needs to happen between. That's the response. And there's
Mm,
conscious and unconscious influence that creates it.
yeah. And Viktor Frankl, it sounds so similar to what you're talking about. Viktor Frankl said, in between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our opportunity to choose, and in that lies our growth and our freedom. And I've talked a lot
Mm,
on this podcast about this concept that I discovered in my master's program right now called self-directed neuroplasticity. And so, our brain neurologically is plastic. It's constantly adapting in response to our thought patterns, the external environment, the internal environment. And so if every time your brain says, I'm scared, you honor that and run away in fear and just drive on past the exit on the 5, then the programming is okay, like that's trodden, that's follow. And then there's none of that that decision making, that override happening. And I can say that several years ago I had an anger response. I was getting mad about stupid things. I was getting like little road rage, and I was just had this like temper that was developing. And so for a whole year, I retrained my brain to laugh instead of getting pissed, because I used to get really mad. And so instead, I was like, you know what? Every time something frustrating happens, I'm just going to think it's the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. And after a whole year, I mean, by halfway through the year, even, it was genuinely coming out that frustrating things were happening. I wasn't getting mad anymore. And I was genuinely laughing when I broke my phone screen, shattered it on the ground. It was like, oh, that's the most hilarious thing I've ever seen. And so, what you're talking about reminds me of, you're talking about the importance of that detachment and the importance of taking ownership over our responses. And every time we override, we're conditioning our brain in the direction that we want it to go. It's self-directed neuroplasticity. And so then if you imagine your life of like, oh, I'm a victim of traffic, I'm a victim of my financial circumstances, I'm a victim of my mom being shitty to me, I'm a victim of abuse, like serious things where people experience serious traumas, then we're just constantly in our responses, and we're not exerting that autonomy over it. And it feels so much better to be autonomous than to be a victim. I mean, there is some things about being a victim that feel better because it's everybody else's fault, but it feels
mm,
stronger and it feels more powerful to be autonomous over our feelings, over our lives, over and controlling the direction of our brains.
yeah. So amazing. Yeah, no, I mean, the victim mentality is no, I mean, so what you're talking about with self-directed neuroplasticity, which I love that term, and I'm like instantly researching it because it
Totally.
explains a lot of what I believe. But the way that I kind of liken that to what I've shared is you can change the pre-programming of the calculator, right? So it's like you have these unconscious beliefs and these traumas and these happenings and these belief systems and these things that have been in place that produce a certain outcome based on whatever happens, but that's not permanent. Like you can change the way you objectively see things. The unconscious automatic response to things is dynamic. It is plastic, right? And the practice that I promote beyond anything is a gratitude practice because it does exactly that, right? So a lot of us were built in with negativity bias, right? This just predisposition to see the world and all the horrible things that are happening in it because, and there is a reason for it, because evolutionarily, when our awareness is primed to the bad things that are happening versus the good things, it is an adaptation for survival. We're more likely to survive when we notice the bad because then we're likely to stay out of it. And that's what the brain's purpose is, to keep us safe, right? To find meaning of everything around us to determine if it's a threat or not. That's what the brain does. So our negativity bias is the unconscious influence. It's the unconscious response that naturally, automatically is pre-programmed to get applied to the events that we experience. But what gratitude does is this self-directed neuroplasticity. It causes you to pause in your journaling or reflective practice to look at the instances where things are good, bright, the possibility in the world. And you do that enough times, you train the formula, you train the programming to see that unconsciously too. And that is the process of mindset development. Is you have this previous pathway, this previous understanding of the way that the world worked, which is your belief system, but then you use consciousness to drive your thinking, to create new thought patterns. And you do that enough times, you convince your brain, oh, that must be what's most important because that's what I'm choosing to do. And it's the consciousness in the consistency of consciousness that then has the ability to update the unconscious belief system until instead of telling yourself, oh, I dropped my phone, that sucks. Now you tell yourself, oh, I dropped my phone. That's funny. Hey, and look, the cracks actually kind of look like Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
Go figure. Cool. I got a Mickey Mouse phone now, right? Whatever it is, because your unconscious, then that happens automatically over time with gratitude, because
Exactly.
that's what gratitude has you do. You pause to see the good in the world until you see the good in the world without having to
Mm.
pause to see it.
Well said. Absolutely beautiful. So I just want everyone listening to, if you're not watching on YouTube, to just imagine Brian as we close today, just managing all of those, or not managing, but breaking through all of those obstacles, all of the pain, all of the limited thinking, and just imagine him running through and crossing the finish line of a 50K. And now put yourself in that image, or think about yourself and the many times that you've driven by something that you always kind of wanted to go see. And now imagine Brian, who wasn't planning on going to the lake and who wasn't wearing the right clothes and didn't know where to go, and just imagine him putting his arms out on a hot summer day and diving into the cool waters of Pyramid Lake. And imagine that that could be you. So I just want to thank you, Brian, for coming today and just sharing, dropping some serious knowledge, that's for sure, but also just sharing these really beautiful and relatable stories and just showing how us A's and B's are different in some ways, but we have so much in common and we have so much that we can learn from each other. And it's almost like we're just like, there's like a road and the A's are on one side and the B's are on the other. And it's just like we take one step in the other, one direction and one in the other. We're not on opposite sides of the world. Some of us have just a little bit figured out on one side and some of us have a little bit figured out on the other side. But as we close, you've spoken just so eloquently and brilliantly today. I'm sure people are curious about this book that's coming out. If there's anything that you want to share about the book and where people can follow you or work with you in the interim until that thing comes out.
Yeah, no, I think the book is a long time away, just because I want it to be excellent. So I want to put some time into it. So I have no idea from when that's going to be out. But the best way to hear about it is to just get in my world and kind of figure out what's going on and be a part of it, right? So the best place to kind of hear my message and to kind of continue on with where we started here is to listen to my podcast, Self Improvement Daily. It's what it's called. Every single day, 3 to 4 minute personal development insights. Haven't missed a weekday in over 6 years, so you can count on me coming back with it here. Every day moving forward. And if you feel inspired, and this is kind of on the newer side, but something I'm organizing. I don't know when this podcast can be released, but something I'm organizing right now that I'm really inspired about is a new social impact campaign called New Year, New You for Good, which is essentially a new year goal setting, best life, best self program that helps you donate to charity and invest in yourself. So that's something that I'm pro bonoing my coaching for people who want to take part in this, fundraise money for charity, and help to change their life and change the world in doing it. So more information about that, we can find a link. We can put a link in the description or whatever, just
Totally.
because that's still all coming together. But if you're feeling inspired to say, hey, cool, I think I could benefit from a little structure, a little more consistency, and a little more organization and more intentionality in the way that I go about things, then I've got a very effective structured system that thousands of people have been through that I'd love to share with you too.
Yeah, Brian's the man. So are you going to go to, Jesse said that Running Man might be the final year next year. Do you think you'll go?
Oh yeah, if that's the case, then I'm sure I will.
Yes. Okay,
Dang it!
cool.
Now I
So
just
if
said it, and now I
I
just said it, so now I
know,
have
yeah, so, okay,
to.
you can see unless you end up having, like, a baby on the way next year, because I know you did just recently
Yeah, I
get
got you.
married, but, then you can come meet Brian and I at Running Man in Georgia next year. It was a
Oh, that'd
great
be epic.
time. It was such a high vibe event with just Brian and everybody. Like, I didn't hear one negative word spoken. So if you just wanna experience what it's like to be around people who see things with rose-colored glasses on and to the next level, it's a super inspiring place to be, and I can't wait to check out your book. I know it's a long ways in the distance, but join Brian's community, follow him on Instagram, and you've got so many cool things in the works. I appreciate you taking the time today to share your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I'm grateful to have been able to share it, and yeah, hopefully. And then this is the thing I'll leave on with, and this is kind of the premise of the book, which is information does nothing, right? Like you can feel good, you can feel like you're growing because you're active, but if you don't do anything differently, you won't get any different results, right? The kind of the framework is you make your choices, which lead to actions, which influence results. So that's kind of my call to action to you today is what's the one thing that you can do differently that will generate a more positive result for you in your life, and go and do it, and don't get in your own way about it, because that's it's the other side of that is where a life well lived lives.
Oh, beautiful. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Cool. All
Okay, Brian, take care. We'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
right, Kate, thank you. Take care.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for joining me for today's episode. I am honored to share this alive time with you. I'm a new show and I love your support. It helps me, it helps bring this show to others who might need this message. And, maybe it helps to buy some treats or food for pajamas along the way. So please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who leads a little aliveness or a little bit of Kate Manser in their life. You never know. Lots of love to y'all. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time.